Okay, let's try this all over again. I just did the whole thing without knowing that it cut out as soon as I hit play, because when I hit play on this PowerPoint to go full screen, I can't see comments and I can't see anything else. So I only have one monitor. I've had so much trouble getting this together. I'm going to tell you what, I tried to record the audio to this before. I must have tried like 6 or 8 times, and I would have interruptions or microphone failures. It's been rough, people. It's been rough. I'm going to try it one more time, and even if nobody's here watching this, because this is, what, 40 minutes later than I said it would be, it'll still be on the Facebook group, so at least you can catch it later. Hey, howdy, hey, friends and neighbors. Scott Sexton here again, telling you about the amazing, super awesome pine tree and its various edible, medicinal, and utility purposes to help you survive the coming zombie apocalypse. Here we go again. So pine trees. These are really handy plants. Okay, I'm going to have to switch over here. So I'm looking at this, but I don't want to lose what I can see of the live stream. I think I can make this work. Give me just a second to adjust my windows for what I'm looking at. Okay. Okay, I think everything's working. Okay. Pine. Seriously? Seriously? Let me try this. Go. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, general info. Pine trees. There are over 200 species worldwide. Mostly they're in the northern hemisphere, but that's not a hard and fast rule, especially in places where they've been introduced as, like a cash crop for lumber and such. I know that they're in Australia now. And they're evergreens, so they keep their needles year-round, and they're sticky. If you've ever climbed a pine tree as a kid, you had that sap on your hands the whole rest of the day, maybe the next day too. They get that sticky resinous sap, and they're conifers, which means cone-bearing. And we're going to look at some other conifers too to differentiate them, but a pine cone looks like a pine cone. And all pines are edible, so you don't need to identify a certain species to know which one to eat or to use medicinally. You just find a pine tree. And where do you find pine trees? You find them, they like acidic soil. So you could always carry around your soil detection kit, and then once you find some acidic soil, then look up and see if there's a pine tree over you. Or probably much easier than that, just look around and find a pine tree, and then you've probably found acidic soil. Some of them like chalky, lime-rich soil. They handle dry soil better than boggy, wet soils for the most part. And you could basically divide these into the softwood and the hardwood pines. And you can tell those apart by sawing off a branch and testing the hardness, or the easier way, just count the needles in the bundles. I think you can, my throat's getting a little sore because I've read through this like 8 times today. Yeah, I think you can divide them further into, with those 2, 3, and 5 bundled pines into like the reds, whites, and yellows, I think. I forget which one goes with which. So let's identify the pines. We're all going to need to go out into this cabin in the woods right here, out in the snow, and spend a long weekend. We can get to know each other. We can read lots of books, play some acoustic guitar, go sledding. But then we're going to go out into that snowy winter landscape, and we're going to find a pine tree. I'm just checking to make sure that the video is still going. It looks like it is. Good. So pine trees have needles, and they have cones. And we're not going to focus on the cones so much because they don't, well, you just don't have to. The needles are really the big giveaway here. Pine trees have longer needles than any of these other ones, and that's the best way to tell them apart is the long needles. And because their needles are in bundles of 2, 3, or 5, that's a real differentiating characteristic here. All of these others will have single needles, whereas if you follow the pine needles back down to the branch, you'll see that they all come together they're all in a clump. They're in a little bundle, and there'll be either 2, 3, or 5 pine needles in a bundle, unlike the spruce right here, which has the needles are all close together, but each needle comes out individually. That's a pretty little plant too. The fir also, and you can see a little better on this fir how each of the needles comes out separately. I want to say that is a Korean fir, but I'm not up on my firs, so if somebody else is, feel free to correct that in the comments. This is a hemlock, not to be mistaken with poison hemlock. That's a completely different plant. Um, this hemlock, the tree hemlock, has some edible and medicinal uses. Poison hemlock, you probably shouldn't try to do any of that. That's bad. The needles here are opposite, so they come out on opposite sides of the branch, sort of in pairs, but each needle comes out separately. They're not in bundles. Thus far, all of the trees I've shown you are fairly safe to mess around with. You're not going to get yourself into a lot of trouble. However, now we're looking at a yew tree, not Y-O-U, but Y-E-W, yew. And yew trees will just kill you dead. They don't even care. They'll spit on your body and do a little dance. There's an edible part on a yew, but I'm not even going to talk about that today. So yeah, the yew is some serious business. This presentation it's going to help you identify pine and to differentiate it from the others, but don't think that I've given you enough characteristics to identify each of these other ones. I would hate for you to go out with some cavalier attitude about, I'm just going to go eat me some, green needle leaf having trees, and then end up, somebody's cautionary tale, and you got to come and log back on and say, hey guys, sorry, I poisoned myself and I died, and then that would be sad. It would also be scary because you were a dead person talking on the internet. That's some scary movie stuff. But again, the needles are not in bundles. They come out singly, and they're shorter, so they're not long like a pine tree. And yes, seriously, this will kill you. So don't eat that. This is an Australian pine, even though it's not really a pine. It's a she oak, but it's not really an oak either. It's like a double agent. It's not a pine. It's not an oak. It is Australian. It is that. They're popping up in a few other places, and they're kind of being invasive. They're in some of the U.S. states like Florida. There's some in Texas. I don't think that there are any in my home state of Arkansas right now. Not any that I've seen for sure. And this is a tree that I don't have a lot of, well, I don't have any direct experience with this one, so I don't want to mislead you. I haven't got to go out and actually play with this tree. There are some edible parts on it, but it's not a pine. Some sources say that it's deciduous and drops its leaves. Some sources say not. Why the conflicting information? I think it may have to do with these needles. And the needles aren't actually needles. They're, I hate being technical, but just for a moment, let's be technical. Those needles are actually branchlets. It's not the same thing as on a pine tree. And the actual leaves, if you see on this picture on the left, the little bands of color in there, that's where the actual leaves are. They're real small. So perhaps the true leaves fall off, so people say it's deciduous, but other people see the branchlets and say, oh, it's still got the leaves. Or maybe it has to do with the climate that it's in, and in a more tropical climate, it doesn't drop its leaves. I really don't know because I haven't got to play with this tree. So in any event, you can see that those branchlets, the things that look like pine needles, they come out singly by themselves, not in a little packet of 2s or 3s. So we can still tell this one apart. They also have those pretty little cones. I don't think those are true cones. Let's talk about some of the uses of the pine tree because it's a very useful plant. Pine nuts, let's start with those because most of us will have eaten a pine nut at some time or another, whether you realize it or not. Unfortunately, even though all the pine trees produce pine nuts, only about 10% of the pine trees produce a pine nut that's large enough to be worth messing with. The rest are going to have probably these little like black specks. That's all I've ever gotten when I've gone out harvesting. And the size of the cone does not reflect the size of the seed, sorry to say. You go out and you gather them when they're brown but still closed. So when they're green and closed, just kind of keep your eye on them, and as they start to turn brown, then you can go out and you can pick them and put them in a brown paper bag or the bag of your choice and set them in the corner, and then forget about them for a week or two. And then when you come back, they will have dried out and opened up and dropped their seeds. And hopefully you'll have something on the bigger side like this, but more than likely you're going to have a bunch of little black specks in the bottom of the bag. To process the seeds, and I write in theory here because I've never been lucky enough to find a tree that has a good sized seed in it. They might be around here, but I've not had the good fortune of picking one of those trees. But you put them in a bag and kind of work them over with a rolling pin to break the shell on the outside. Then you separate the seed from the hull, and you enjoy that delicious pine nutty goodness. Yum. The little bitty teeny tiny ones, you could eat those too. I mean, it's a pine tree. It's not going to poison you. But most seeds are designed to pass through the intestinal tract of mammals and birds and then pass out the other end. That's kind of how they spread their seeds around. So I kind of doubt that you would get any nutrients from that. Now the needles are my favorite because you don't have to wait for a certain time of the year. They're there year round. You don't have to climb up to the top of the tree and pick a cone. You can just reach up to a branch and pull them off. And they're really useful. First, they have a lot of vitamin C, and I'll hear lots of different reports about, oh, it's 30 times more vitamin C than a lemon. Oh, 75 times, 1.5 million times. Uh, I It's really hard to track down the exact amount of vitamin C. I do believe that it's a real significant amount. I mean, I think it's going to be a good vitamin C boost, but I would hate to try to pin down an exact number. Sometimes the wild plants, it's hard to find exact numbers. And plus, they're not standardized. They're wild, and one plant may have a lot more than another. But there's that. They're also good for respiratory issues. They have turpentine in them. And I don't mean that to frighten you off. I'm not talking about like paint stripping turpentine. I mean, technically turpentine is turpentine, but this is not concentrated. This is a very light amount. It's mixed in with the other plant constituents. And in this amount, it has a nice, therapeutic effect for the body. It helps to open up the pathways in your lungs and bronchi. Bronchioles, bronchionculum. Let me just move on from tripping over that word. And the little bugs that are in your lungs infecting you. I mean like bacteria. I don't mean like like ladybugs and stuff. I'm sure it would be bad I'm sure it would discourage them too. But I'm talking about the bacteria and such. It helps to convince them to not be alive anymore as well. The easiest way to do this is just to grab a handful of pine needles and chew them up. Let it mix on with your saliva there, and swallow the juice, but spit out the pulp. And the taste can vary from tree to tree. My oldest son, he likes just in any tree. I don't think he's ever met a pine tree he didn't like. But I'm a little more picky. Some of them just taste nasty. A lot of them are all right, and then sometimes you'll find one that tastes really good. So if you try this out and then you get one you really don't like, I want you to be brave, and I want you to go on to a different tree or a different branch because the taste will vary. Now, perhaps a slightly more sophisticated method of getting the medicinals and nutrients from pine needles is to make pine needle tea. And that's really easy. Just take some green pine needles, cut them up, and put them in a teacup or something. Pour some hot water on top of that, and then cover it and let it steep. The reason you want to cover it is so that all of the essential oils and any of the volatile chemicals, I don't mean volatile like it's going to blow up, I mean volatile like it'll evaporate. So it helps to contain those. That turpentine I talked about, it's made of terpenoids, which are a very small essential oil type of particle, and you'll lose that kind of stuff. You'll lose a significant amount of them if you leave it open. I'm not going to say that it's not medicinal if you don't cover it, but it's more medicinal if you do cover it. And just let it sit and steep until it's cool enough that you're ready to drink it, and then take the covering off and make sure any of the liquids that have condensed on the top, let those drip back in, because a lot of that is the really good stuff. And I'm not a fan of plain pine needle tea, but you can add some honey, and that makes it good. Or you can also add some orange zest or dried orange peel, and it gives it sort of a holiday Christmassy type of taste, And if I was sick taking this, I would take it about, I would drink a cup of this, maybe 3 times a day, or, maybe 5, just as needed. We'd already talked about it being good for respiratory issues. It's also got anti-cancer properties, and I've got some of the studies I was looking at have provided a link for at the end of this. But yeah, I was looking at some of these. They found it the constituents in pine needles to be effective against several different cancers. I mean, now there's a bunch of different cancers, but I mean at least several of the ones they've tested. And it was good at stopping the spread or discouraging the spread, and it was good at encouraging those cancer cells just to kind of go off in a corner and die. And so I'm in favor of that. In one of the studies, they used freeze-dried pine needles that were powdered up, and I don't have a freeze dryer, so I think most of us don't have freeze dryers. I would love to get one someday because they do have home versions. But if you don't have a freeze dryer, what's the next best thing to do? I think a tincture is the best way to go. If you were to just dry the pine needles, I'm afraid you would lose too many of those volatile oils, and it wouldn't be as medicinal. So tincturing it will help to preserve it and to extract the compounds. Since pines are finely resinous, I would use a higher proof alcohol. If you saw the earlier live stream that I did, I used a 180 proof alcohol. And I think really in retrospect, I think I would back off of that a little bit because the pine needles aren't all that resinous. And also when you have, some alcohol and some water, the water pulls out some constituents, the alcohol pulls out some, and that way you have more total altogether. But there you go. It's also antiviral. It contains shikimic acid, which is one of the raw ingredients used to make Tamiflu. But I'm a fan of using more of the whole plant rather than an isolated concentrated extract, because the concentrated isolated extracts used, you use them away from all of the other plant constituents, and you can get side effects that really, one of those other plant constituents might have taken care of that and protected you from it. I really think all of these different uh, chemicals or energies or pieces of information in the plant, I think they're all there for a purpose. I don't think they're just there on accident and happenstance. I think they were all placed there, and when you take them out, you run the risk of losing some of that important information that it or the trait that it was going to give you. You lose that. So when you look for maybe just the strongest antibiotic component in a plant, and you pull that out, and not only do you lose everything else that was in the plant, but now you've got a really big gun to knock down the bacteria, but there's going to be some little bug that survives that, and then all of its offspring, they're also going to be able to survive it. They're going to be resistant, or they're going to be immune. And antibiotic resistance, you just pretty much, you don't hear about that with plant-based medicines, with a true plant-based medicine, because there are so many different active constituents in the plant. It's not just one or two things. It'll be, like a dozen or, 20 or 30 in some of these plants. And it's just, even though they won't all be super powerful, there are just so many of them that the little bad bugs, they can't adapt to everything. And with the Tamiflu, we're starting to see some of those problems too, where you take the Tamiflu, and then it leaves your body relatively unchanged, and it enters into the water supply. And pharmaceuticals are notoriously difficult to filter out for these water treatment plants. So it gets into the water supply, and it goes into some pond or some lake somewhere, and the geese and ducks are swimming in it, and they're drinking the water, and they're getting these really mild diluted doses of Tamiflu, and then the viruses that they have, they're not getting enough Tamiflu to kill them, and natural selection takes over, and the stronger ones live more and more and reproduce. And now when the next, avian flu comes through, we're in a bunch of trouble because the Tamiflu doesn't work as good anymore. You've got to take a bunch more of it to be effective, and then it's going to have more side effects, and you get in this, vicious spiral. So, just make some pine needle tea, Well, no, don't take that as medical advice. Talk to your trusted medical practitioner and your doctor and stuff, and there's all that. But I'm not giving you medical advice. This is for education and entertainment purposes. What was I going to say? Yeah, you can get shikimic acid also in sweet gum. Sweet gum is another plant, and the star anise. That's actually the one they use for making Tamiflu, is the star anise seed pod. Was that everything I was going to say about this? It might as well be, because we've got quite off topic from pine needles. So the cambium, that's the inner bark. That doesn't mean the wood all the way to the core. That wood into the middle, that's dead. It's like the skeleton of the tree. It's just structural support. Someday I've got to make a video to show how you can harvest that inner bark. It's a little confusing to talk about, I'm afraid. And I'm not sure that the pictures really do it justice. But on the outer layer of the tree, that's the bark. You're not eating the bark. Just under that, that's the cambium layer. That's the living layer that transports the nutrients up and down the tree trunk. And that's the part that we eat. Underneath that is just the dead wood, the structural support. I've got to make a video about this. But you can eat the cambium raw. I don't really care for it raw, or you can boil it, fry it, or roast it. Frying is definitely the best in some butter. You just do it until it's crispy and nice, and it's actually legitimately pretty good. Um, a more versatile way of handling it is to dry it and then grind it into flour. And you can add that to soups or breads like I list there. You can put it in anything, man. You can put that in your orange juice in the morning or a cup of water and knock that back, or a green smoothie. You can use it as a like sort of a oatmeal gruel type of food. Just get some of that in a bowl and add some water or add some milk and stir it up. Flavor wise, you may want to add some honey or something, but it's just a really good gentle nutrient. These the cambiums of these edible trees like pine or elm, they've been used to help nurse people back to health when they've had a very delicate or irritated digestive system and had a hard time with digesting other foods. It's been a good gentle nutrient source to help build them back up. And another good thing is you can gather it year round. You don't have to wait until spring. But please don't kill the tree. If you go all the way around the tree, that tree is dead. You can do a vertical stripe. You can you can get a significant patch off of the tree, but um, let's just be kind to the trees. I hate killing a tree if I don't need to. Better yet, just take one of the big lower branches and cut it off, and you can take all the cambium off of that, and then you can chop the rest of the branches up for your fire in the winter, and then the tree can grow another branch. Okay, what's next here? We have the young male cones. Right. Um, they're not technically cones. I hate being technical. I like just using pragmatic language, but just so you know, they're not cones. So when you're out telling your friends, hey, you can eat these cones, and somebody says, actually, those aren't technically, you can say, yeah, they're not cones. I know. I'm just being pragmatic. But you can eat them raw too, but you can have them boiled or baked. They're there. They're nothing super special. That's all I got to say about that. Pollen, vilified. Did I misspell vilified? Let's see. It has a little underline. Let's check. Everybody, we're gonna see if I spelled it wrong. I'm not really the best speller. Oh, look at that. Now, now that's corrected. There you go. Correction on the fly. Pollen, vilified for causing allergies, and it does. People can be allergic to pine pollen, but usually what's making you sneeze is something else. The pine pollen is real heavy and it doesn't travel very far, so there's usually not a lot of pine pollen in the air. It's just right under the pine tree, and it gets that yellow stuff all over your car if you park underneath it. And it's kind of a waxy substance too. It's waxy, and so when it gets into your eyes or your nose, it's not as provocative to your allergies as some of these other pollens are. But I mean, you can be allergic to it. I'm not saying you can't, but it's an excellent food source. There's a lot of nutrition in there. I guess it has to do with I don't know, producing little plant seeds. I'm not sure why. I guess that's why. The time to gather it is spring, with a little variation, of course, depending on where you live. And it's easy to harvest. Just get a paper bag, put it over the end of those branches where those male cones are, turn it down, and then tap or shake that paper bag to collect the pollen, and just repeat that around the tree until you have all you want. One of the really interesting and cool things about pine pollen is that, oh, it's not going to let me advance the slides. Hey, come on now. Come on now. We've had this really good thing going now, computer. There we go. It is a testosterone mimic. And most plants that you hear about mimicking one of the sex hormones is that they're estrogen mimics, most of them. Like soy is an estrogen mimic. It has xenoestrogens. Or clover has xenoestrogens. Several plants do. So it's kind of nice to have the flip side of that, because men and women can get too much of these xenoestrogens, and it kind of messes with our systems. Men and women both have estrogen and testosterone, and we need them in the correct proportions. So the xenoestrogens can be helpful, but most of the time we're getting too much of them. It's not just the estrogens that our body produces normally, and it's not just xenoestrogens from plants, but from other foods, processed foods, from plastic things that we're drinking from or handling. In a lot of our health and beauty supplies, there are these xenoestrogens. In medications, we're getting we're getting a lot of these estrogen-like chemicals in our bodies, and it's just it throws things out of whack. So a testosterone mimic can kind of help to counterbalance some of that. And I don't advocate eating a bucket of the stuff. I mean, you don't want to grow a beard on your forehead, you know. But uh, I think that a reasonable amount of this would be a perfectly healthy, just like it can give you an energy boost, help you to burn fat, and help counteract some of the estrogens. You can hold it under your tongue if you're trying to get it for the testosterone benefits because you'll absorb it through your mucous membranes. Whereas if you just swallow it down, it kind of gets beat up by your stomach acid before you can absorb it. 1 or 2 spoonfuls a day. That is a recommendation from a book called Free Food and Medicine by Marcus Rothkranz. Uh, I'm not going to throw out my own recommendation for how much to take because I'm a little afraid of getting in trouble if somebody grows a forehead beard. Again, I really don't think that's going to happen. I think this is a gentler, safer thing. This is not like taking illegal drugs. This is sort of like the woodland version of over-the-counter medication, right? Uh, just don't take it for a long time. Don't eat a bucket of the stuff, and we're all going to be fine and not grow forehead beards. The sap, the sap is really useful. You can use it as a glue, both as a mundane glue, just for paper or popsicle sticks or whatever you've got, or you can use it on wounds to hold a cut together. And you can do that because it's antimicrobial and helps to keep the cut from being infected. Of course, if you're at home and not in the woods, you might want to use a Band-Aid. But if you're out in the woods, this is the stuff to go to. It's also an excellent fire starter if you're one of those survival type of people. I think we're all survival type of people in a sense. Um, and you can harvest it year round. So that's good. The young roots are also edible when you strip off the bark. Now, I haven't tried this one. I'm not going to lie to you. I haven't done this one because around where I live, the ground is so rocky, digging down to the roots is a near Herculean task. Um, but uh, but apparently you can do this, and you can save the bark and put it in cold water to let these natural sugars diffuse out, and then you can drink that. And that's the roots. I think are we yeah, we're about at the end here. I had to install Google Chrome to finally get this to work, so I'm afraid I made kind of a Faustian bargain. But I think we got through the first one. Um, Let me tell you a little about the resources. This playful learning one. As soon as I'm done, I'm going to get on here and I'm going to attach a evergreen identification document that I found. I thought it was fun. It was pretty convenient, and I think you might enjoy that. And I just want to give them credit for that. So that's their website. Then Eat the Weeds is a really good place for to go for foraging information. He's a really knowledgeable guy, and I've put the address for the his article and for the YouTube address. I will attach all of these. I know you can't click on the screen and go there, so I'll put these in the comments so you can follow them. Wildflowers and Weeds. This is the guy that wrote Botany in a Day. He's a real smart guy, and his approach to identifying plant families first is a really good way of doing it. And then those are 3 of the articles that I was looking at, and those links will take you to the abstracts for those articles, for those studies. Okay, I think this concludes it. Wow, finally, after maybe 8 or so times going through it, and we've been on for nearly 30 minutes, I've finally got it. Even though everybody that might have been watching dropped out after it cut out, and I just went through this whole thing for the last 30 minutes, and it cut out, and I didn't know it. Okay. That's it, guys. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you like this type of presentation, or if you like it better when they're written, or if you want me to do it all in song form. I don't know. Just give me some comments. If you got some criticisms, I'll listen to that too. I'm a big boy. I can handle that. And I will see you guys next time. Until then, watch out for the plants and the zombies, and happy foraging.